Hello, this is Rose Vital. Welcome to part 2 of Evas Story. In this video, we'll be discussing what Eva had to endure during her attempts of breaking free from her abusive husband. Previously, we shared how her life was impacted by the Philippines laws on birth control and abortion. If you've missed it, the link will be in the description box below. Please be advised that her story includes rape and physical abuse. Eva's husband, Dave, hardly lived at their home anymore. He spent most of his time with other women. He only stopped by now and again to provide just enough money for her and the children to eat. During those visits, he would occasionally force himself onto Eva and Julia, as it turned out. Eva had to work odd jobs, all while trying to take care of her children since she couldn't depend on Dave to provide for them. When Dave found out that Eva had helped Julia get an abortion, which later resulted in Julia's death, he went mad. He beat Eva to within an inch of her life. She only survived because a neighbor brought her to the hospital and paid for her medical bills. When Eva recovered, in order to get away from Dave, she moved into her friend's tiny apartment. She was not going to wait for him to abuse the rest of their children. From safety, she tried to end her marriage with Dave. In the Philippines, the only officially recognized way for people to end a marriage would be through a legal separation or an annulment. The lack of a divorce law is evidence of the Catholic Church's influence. They view marriage to be a sacred vow. Once unified by God, it cannot be destroyed by any person. Legal separation does not end a marital union in the legal sense, but allows couples to live apart and separate their possessions. However, the proceedings of a legal separation can often be dragged on for years, and usually with unsuccessful results. It can cost in excess of thousands of US dollars, which for most people on a Filipino salary is insurmountable. An annulment is usually the route that most Filipinos take when dealing with the legalities of marriage separation. An annulment basically denotes that the marriage did not happen in the first place. This does not apply to 10% of the Filipino population who are Muslims and are able to divorce under Muslim family laws. Despite Dave's refusal to cooperate, Eva tried to get her marriage annulled. She had substantial evidence that Dave had beaten her half to death. She even had witnesses who testified to the police about the assault. She also had proof that Dave had been cheating on her with other women for years. Furthermore, she accused Dave of rape, not only of her, but also her daughter. Even after all this, she was still unable to convince the courts that her situation warranted an annulment. There are very limited grounds on which an annulment can be approved. A mistaken identity, being underage, contracting a sexually transmitted disease, or insanity are those grounds. This makes it very difficult for vulnerable women to get an annulment since abuse and infidelity are not seen as valid reasons. Without an annulment, Eva would be unable to protect her assets. Furthermore, she'd be stuck with her husband's name until the annulment was approved. Finally, if she were to enter a new relationship before her marriage was annulled, she could risk being arrested and charged with adultery. Her fight to end her marriage dragged on for years. She was frequently told by court officials that in order to expedite her case, she'd have to pay large sums of money to them on a regular basis. She spent 4 years in legal battles that went nowhere. A lawyer approached her, offering to end her marriage for the equivalent of $3,000 US, part of an all-inclusive package. However, after paying the lawyer, she found out that the package was a scam and that all the legal documents were forged. These sorts of scams aren't uncommon in the Philippines. Ultimately, Eva tried to convince the courts that she had always been psychologically incapacitated and therefore was unaware of what she was doing when she first married Dave. With this, the court finally approved of the annulment. Her joy was short-lived. Dave filed for custody of her children, citing that his ex-wife was mentally unfit to raise their children. The courts agreed and granted full custody of her remaining children to her rapist ex-husband. Since 1999, Filipino legislators have campaigned to introduce divorce laws. In 2018, conservative lawmakers and the Catholic Church failed to block a divorce bill that passed its first process of becoming law. The bill seeks to provide spouses the means to get a divorce under limited grounds, such as reasons stated under legal separation and annulment under the Family Code of the Philippines, gender reassignment surgery, irreconcilable differences, joint petition of spouses, infidelity, abuse towards the petitioner or petitioner's child, drug addiction of the respondent. The bill would also serve to protect vulnerable women as well as children. For the 53% of adult Filipinos who support the legalization of divorce, this bill would be fantastic. Still, some conservative officials continue to oppose it out of principle. The bill still needs to go through the Senate and finally the President. In the past, President Duterte has stated that he is against divorce laws. However, he might be persuaded to change his mind if more Filipinos openly showed support for the bill. Evas' story is reminiscent of the plight that many Filipino women had faced in recent years. That is because her story is based on an amalgamation of many documented events that actually took place in the Philippines. Evas' story was stitched together using real-life events that occurred to various Filipino women. Some of their stories were told to me directly. Others were well documented in the news. I put them all together to create Eva. Please don't view Eva as a fictional character, but rather as a symbol of the struggles that most poor Filipino women have to endure. If her story affected you at all, if you found it to be tragic and heartbreaking, then be aware that there are millions of Filipino women going through similar events all the time. For their lives to be improved, the Filipino system needs to be changed. Not only for today's women, but also to ensure that future generations never have to go through what Eva did. If you appreciated this video, please give it a like, and if you want more content like this, please subscribe and ding the bell for notifications. It's been Faithfully Honest. Ciao.